It was a bright and sunny morning, and the school playground was alive with the usual sounds of children laughing, chatting, and running around before the first bell rang. Birds chirped in the distance, and the gentle breeze carried the faint scent of flowers from the nearby garden. The classroom doors opened slowly as students began to file in, some chatting excitedly about their homework, some carrying colorful school bags, and some quietly keeping to themselves. Everything seemed ordinary at first, just like any other school day, but little did anyone know, this day was going to be different in a way that no one could have expected. As the teacher arranged books on the desk and checked the attendance list, a small movement at the doorway caught her attention. She turned her head and noticed a young girl entering the classroom. Her footsteps were soft, almost hesitant, and she walked slowly, keeping her eyes on the floor. What immediately struck everyone was that the girl was barefoot. There were no shoes on her small feet, no socks to cover them, just bare skin touching the cold, polished floor. The moment she stepped in, a quiet murmur spread across the room. Some children glanced at each other with surprise, while others stared directly at her, unable to hide their curiosity. The teacher watched closely as the girl made her way to her usual seat at the back of the class. She noticed the slight slump in her shoulders, the way she clutched her books tightly to her chest as if they were a shield, and the nervous glance she cast around the room. It was clear to the teacher that the girl was not just missing shoes by accident. There was a story behind this. Something that had caused the girl to walk into school barefoot in front of everyone. Whispers started immediately among the students. Low voices exchanged quick guesses. Why doesn't she have shoes? One child whispered to a friend, maybe she forgot them. Another replied, but the doubt lingered in the air. Some children giggled quietly, while others looked uncomfortable. Noticing the mixture of reactions, the teacher knew she had to handle the situation carefully. She didn't want the girl to feel embarrassed or singled out. At the same time, she couldn't ignore the signs that something serious might be going on. The girl moved slowly toward her desk, trying to avoid drawing more attention. She kept her eyes down and seemed almost invisible, but the room was small, and her bare feet were hard to miss. She tugged her books closer and took a deep breath, sitting quietly as the other children settled into their seats. Despite her effort to remain unnoticed, the teacher could sense the anxiety radiating from her, and she knew that she needed to show care and concern. The rest of the morning passed in a blur, with lessons beginning as usual, but the girl remained quiet, rarely raising her hand or participating in class activities. Every time she shifted in her seat, the teacher's eyes were drawn to her bare feet. It was a silent reminder that something was not right. The children, too, occasionally glanced at her. Their curiosity mingled with a growing awareness that the situation was unusual. During the short break, a few of the classmates tried to approach her, asking small, hesitant questions, but the girl only smiled faintly and shook her head, saying nothing about her missing shoes. Even then, there was no anger or frustration in her demeanor, only a quiet dignity that spoke volumes about her character. The teacher, observing from a distance, felt a mixture of empathy and determination. She decided that after class, she would speak to the girl privately, wanting to understand what had brought her to school barefoot that morning. As the bell rang signaling the end of the first period, the classroom settled into a quiet rhythm, but the image of the small girl with bare feet lingered in everyone's minds. It was not just about the missing shoes anymore, it was about curiosity, compassion, and the unspoken questions that needed answers. The teacher made a mental note to approach the situation gently, knowing that this unusual day had the potential to reveal something important, something that could teach the whole class a lesson far greater than any textbook. Even though it was only the beginning of the school day, there was a sense of anticipation in the air, as if everyone, students and teacher alike, felt that something meaningful was about to unfold. The girl, unaware of the attention she had drawn, focused on her lessons, quietly hoping the day would pass without too many questions. But little did she know that her simple act of arriving barefoot would start a journey of understanding, empathy, and care, a journey that would not only change her life but also leave a lasting impression on her teacher and classmates. The teacher watched the girl quietly as she took her seat at the back of the classroom, her small hands clutching her books tightly, her bare feet resting awkwardly on the cold floor. There was something different about the way she moved, a careful hesitation, almost as if each step was weighed with worry. The teacher had seen many children in her years, some shy, some bold, some playful. But there was a seriousness in this girl's eyes that made her pause. It wasn't just curiosity that filled The room, it was concern, a quiet unease that spoke to the teacher's heart. She tried to focus on the lesson, calling out math problems and reading passages, but her gaze kept drifting toward the girl, noticing how she shifted uncomfortably in her seat, how she avoided looking at the other children, and how her small hands trembled slightly as she wrote. The teacher felt a pang of empathy, realizing that this child was carrying something heavy, something invisible yet deeply felt. Something about the way the girl quietly endured the situation struck a chord in the teacher. During a short break, the teacher approached her desk gently, leaning down to the girl's level. "Are you okay?" she asked softly, careful not to embarrass her in front of the class. The girl looked up briefly, her eyes meeting the teacher's, and for a moment, the classroom seemed to fall silent. Even though she wanted to speak, the girl shook her head ever so slightly, murmuring a quiet, "I'm fine." Her voice was almost too soft to hear, but there was a firmness in her tone, a subtle way of saying that she did not want to explain in front of everyone. The teacher nodded slowly, sensing both the girl's courage and her struggle. She knew that forcing the girl to talk in front of the class would only make her retreat further. She needed to find another way, a more personal way to understand. The teacher's mind raced through possibilities, thinking about how she could help without making the girl feel ashamed or embarrassed. She understood that empathy was not just about asking questions. It was about noticing, listening, and being patient. After a few minutes, the girl returned to her work, still quiet, still distant. The teacher took a deep breath and decided to keep a careful watch. She observed the subtle details, the way the girl's toes curled slightly as she wrote, the way her eyes darted around when someone laughed, the way she avoided standing up quickly, almost as if moving caused discomfort or reminded her of something she wanted to hide. These small details spoke louder than words, and the teacher realized that there was a story here that needed gentle attention. As the class continued, the teacher discreetly asked another student to bring some extra shoes from the school's storage, hoping that it might ease the situation without making it obvious, but when she offered them to the girl later, she politely declined, shaking her head with a quiet smile. "Thank you, but I'm okay." The teacher could see the strength in the girl's quiet refusal, a determination to face the day despite the challenges she carried, and at the same time, a silent plea for understanding, not pity. By the end of the morning, the teacher's concern had grown into a quiet determination. She realized that this was more than just a missing pair of shoes. It was a sign of a deeper story, a challenge that the girl had endured without complaint. The teacher felt a mixture of admiration and responsibility, knowing that it was her role to offer support, to show that someone cared, and to make sure the girl felt safe, respected, and valued in the classroom. As the bell rang for recess, the teacher observed the girl from across the room, seeing her stand quietly, her bare feet touching the floor as if each step was deliberate, thoughtful. She knew that understanding this girl's story would require patience, trust, and compassion. She silently made a promise to herself. She would find out why this child had walked into school without shoes, not out of curiosity or judgment, but out of care, out of the belief that every child deserved dignity, empathy, and support. That day, as the students ran out into the playground laughing and playing, the teacher stayed behind for a moment, reflecting on what she had seen. She understood that some lessons were not in the textbooks, that sometimes the most important teaching came from observing, caring, and stepping beyond the usual classroom routine. The teacher knew that the day had only just begun, but already, a meaningful story was unfolding, one that could change not only the girl's life but also the way the entire class, and perhaps even the teacher herself, viewed compassion, kindness, and understanding. The classroom buzzed with whispers and quiet chatter, as the other students tried to make sense of what they had just seen. Some glanced at their desks, pretending to be busy, while others stole quick, curious looks at the girl sitting at the back. Her bare feet were impossible to ignore, and even the most focused students found their attention drifting. The teacher, sensing the mixture of curiosity and confusion, moved through the room slowly, speaking softly to those who seemed concerned or confused, making sure that no one teased or singled her out. Among the students, reactions varied widely. Some were confused, whispering to their friends, "Why doesn't she have shoes?" or "Did she forget them at home?" Others were more judgmental, exchanging quick giggles or making small, subtle comments. But most of all, there was a sense of tension in the air, a feeling that something unusual was happening. A few students tried to be kind, offering her pencil cases or helping her pick up books that slipped from her desk, but the girl politely nodded or smiled, quietly refusing extra attention. She seemed to want to blend in, to be just another student, even when everything about her situation made her stand out. The teacher noticed a small boy in the front row staring openly at the girl, curiosity written all over his face. She walked over and asked him quietly to focus on his own work. "Sometimes people have things we can't see," she said gently, and the boy nodded, seeming to understand without fully knowing what she meant. Meanwhile, a group of girls whispered together, glancing occasionally at the girl, some feeling sympathy, others unsure how to react. There was an invisible line between wanting to help and feeling awkward or embarrassed, and most of the children hovered somewhere in the middle, unsure which side to take. As the lesson continued, the teacher decided to turn the classroom energy into something positive, asking a few students to read aloud or share answers with the class. She kept glancing at the girl, noticing the quiet way she participated, offering answers carefully, and never drawing unnecessary attention to herself. Slowly, the whispers began to die down, replaced by curiosity that was softer, gentler, more thoughtful than before. Some students began to realize that it wasn't about making fun or pointing out differences. It was about understanding, compassion, and quietly noticing someone's struggles. During a brief break, a small group of children walked past her desk, whispering questions softly. "Do you need shoes? Are you okay?" The girl shook her head and smiled faintly, not because she didn't need help, but because she didn't want anyone to worry. Her strength and dignity were evident even in her quiet refusal. The teacher watched from a distance, feeling a mixture of pride and concern, realizing that her classroom was now a place of small, subtle lessons in empathy, kindness, and awareness. Even the students who initially giggled or whispered began to pay attention in a different way, noticing how the girl handled herself with quiet courage, how she focused on her work despite the stares, and how she never complained or drew attention to her situation. This shift in perspective didn't happen all at once, but it was visible, a small transformation in the classroom atmosphere, a reminder that even children could learn empathy when given the chance. By the end of the morning, the teacher had observed more than just the girl's bare feet. She had seen resilience, dignity, and strength, but also a quiet sadness that needed understanding. The reactions of the students were a reflection of human curiosity, sometimes judgmental, sometimes kind, and the teacher understood that it was her role to guide them, to teach them that compassion was more important than curiosity, and that helping someone quietly, without making them feel embarrassed, was one of the most valuable lessons they could learn. As the bell rang for recess, the classroom seemed different, calmer, more thoughtful. Children walked out in small groups, still talking quietly, but their whispers now carried curiosity mixed with empathy. Some looked back at the girl, not to laugh or tease, but to check if she was okay, and the girl, sitting quietly at her desk, noticed the change too. A faint smile appeared on her face, small but meaningful. She was no longer completely invisible, not because of her situation, but because people were beginning to understand, to notice, to care. The teacher took a moment to reflect on what she had seen, knowing that this day, unusual as it started, had already begun teaching lessons far beyond the classroom curriculum. She understood that sometimes the most important lessons came not from books or tests, but from human experiences, from noticing, feeling, and responding with empathy. That day, in that small classroom, a story of courage, dignity, and understanding quietly began to unfold, a story that would touch hearts far beyond the school walls. After noticing the girl's bare feet and the quiet tension in the classroom, the teacher felt a stronger need to help. She knew that simply watching would not solve the problem, and she wanted to do something, anything, that could make the girl feel more comfortable and included. As the morning lessons continued, she thought about possible solutions, trying to come up with a way to support the child without embarrassing her in front of the class. During the short break, the teacher quietly asked one of the older students to check the school's lost and found, see if there's a pair of shoes that might fit. She whispered, keeping her voice low so no one else could hear. The student nodded and hurried down the hallway, returning a few minutes later with a small pair of shoes that had been left behind, slightly worn but clean, and suitable for a child the girl's size. The teacher held the shoes carefully, hoping this small gesture could Help. She knelt down beside the girl's desk and gently offered the shoes. I found these at school, she said softly. Would you like to wear them? The girl looked up, her eyes meeting the teacher's, and for a moment, a flicker of surprise crossed her face. Her fingers twitched slightly as she touched the shoes, but she shook her head quietly, smiling faintly. No, thank you, she said, her voice soft but firm. Her refusal wasn't rudeness, it was a quiet way of saying that while she appreciated the gesture, the problem was bigger than just borrowing shoes for the day. The teacher understood immediately, realizing that this small solution would not address the real issue. She gently nodded, placing the shoes back on the desk, and spoke kindly. That's okay. We will figure this out together. I just want you to know that it's alright to accept help when you need it. The girl nodded slightly, a small, almost invisible gesture of trust. She returned to her work, quietly focusing on her assignment, but the teacher could see the weight of her thoughts, the challenges she carried, and the strength it took to endure them. Meanwhile, some of the students, curious about what had happened, leaned closer to watch the interaction. They whispered quietly to one another, noticing the girl's calm reaction, some admiring her quiet courage, others beginning to understand that helping someone didn't always mean offering quick fixes. The teacher observed these reactions carefully, realizing that the lesson extended beyond the girl herself. This was an opportunity for the entire class to learn about empathy, patience, and respect. Throughout the rest of the morning, the teacher tried other gentle ways to make the girl feel included. She encouraged group activities where the girl could participate without standing out. She assigned her to small projects with friendly classmates who were kind and understanding, and she made sure that no one made fun of her or teased her situation. Little by little, the atmosphere in the classroom began to shift. The girl's quiet presence became less of a curiosity and more of a normal part of the day. Yet the teacher knew that these attempts at school solutions were temporary. They could provide comfort, but they could not solve the deeper problem behind the girl arriving without shoes. Each time she looked at the girl, the teacher's heart ached a little, knowing that something was missing in her life outside the classroom, something that went beyond school rules or materials. She realized that real help would require understanding, compassion, and action beyond the school walls. By the time lunch arrived, the teacher had made a decision. She would need to visit the girl's home to truly understand her situation. She knew it would not be easy, but she also knew that pretending everything was fine was not an option. Helping meant going deeper, finding the root of the problem, and offering meaningful support. The teacher packed up her notes, her heart full of determination, knowing that this unusual day had already taught her as much as it had taught the children in her classroom. Even the girl seemed to sense a subtle change. Though she did not speak of it, there was a quiet understanding in her eyes, a hint of trust forming toward her teacher. She continued to work on her assignments, her bare feet resting on the cool floor, but the presence of someone who cared deeply and understood her challenges made her feel just a little lighter, a little less alone. The small solutions at school were not everything, but they were the beginning, and both teacher and student knew that the next step would be even more important. The rest of the day passed quietly, with lessons, laughter, and the usual routine, but beneath it all, there was a shared sense of purpose. A small, invisible connection had formed between teacher and student, one built on observation, respect, and care. The teacher left the classroom at the end of the day knowing that the real journey had just begun, a journey that would take her to the girl's home, to discover the truth, and to offer support that went beyond temporary solutions or school rules. As the afternoon sun streamed through the classroom windows, the teacher could not stop thinking about the girl, her bare feet, and the quiet courage she had shown all day. Every small attempt to help at school had its limits, and the teacher knew that understanding the real reason behind her situation required more than temporary solutions. She needed to see the girl's world beyond the classroom, to witness her life at home, and to approach it with care, patience, and compassion. The teacher sat at her desk during a free period, tapping her pen against her notebook, thinking carefully about the decision she was about to make. Visiting a student's home was not something she did lightly. It required sensitivity, respect, and preparation, but she felt strongly that this was necessary. The girl's quiet refusal of the borrowed shoes had spoken volumes, and it was clear that the problem went deeper than anyone in the classroom could understand. She remembered her own childhood, the moments when challenges had seemed invisible to others, and how a small act of understanding could make all the difference. She reflected on the responsibility she carried as a teacher, not just to educate, but to notice, to care, and to act when a student needed help. Visiting the girl's home was not just about solving the immediate problem of missing shoes, it was about showing empathy, offering support, and building trust. She wanted the girl to know that someone genuinely cared about her well-being. After making a few discreet phone calls to ensure it would be appropriate and welcomed, the teacher packed her bag with a few items, a small notebook, a folder of school supplies, and a gentle determination to approach the visit with kindness. She rehearsed what she would say, how she would ask questions without judgment, and how she would offer help without making the girl or her family feel embarrassed. The thought of stepping into the girl's home filled her with a mixture of anticipation and nervousness, but she knew it was the right thing to do. When the final bell rang, dismissing the students for the day, the teacher watched as the children filed out, some still whispering quietly about the girl's bare feet, others completely absorbed in their own world, but the teacher's mind remained focused, thinking about how to approach the situation delicately. She wanted the girl to feel safe, not pressured, and to understand that this visit was an act of care, not intrusion. As she walked to the girl's house later that afternoon, the teacher noticed the familiar streets bathed in the golden light of the setting sun. Each step toward the girl's home felt heavier than usual, carrying with it both hope and responsibility. She rehearsed silently, reminding herself to speak softly, to listen more than she spoke, and to offer help in a way that preserved dignity. The teacher knew that this visit could change everything, not just for the girl, but for the entire classroom, for the school, and perhaps even for herself. When she arrived at the girl's modest home, she hesitated for a moment at the door, taking a deep breath to steady herself. The walls were simple, the garden small but tended with care, and the quiet of the neighborhood seemed to echo the calm she wanted to bring into the home. She knocked gently, and a woman appeared in the doorway, polite but reserved, introducing herself as the girl's mother. The teacher smiled warmly, explaining her reason for coming and reassuring the mother that she meant no harm, only support and understanding. The girl peeked from behind the doorway, her eyes wide but cautious, recognizing her teacher immediately. There was a moment of silence, a pause filled with unspoken understanding, and then the girl stepped forward slightly, hesitant but willing to let the teacher in. The teacher offered a soft greeting, keeping her tone calm and welcoming, assuring the girl and her mother that she was there to help, not to judge. Once inside, the teacher began to ask gentle questions about the girl's day, her routines, and her needs, listening carefully to every word, every pause, and every unspoken emotion. She realized that this visit was about more than shoes. It was about understanding the challenges, the resilience, and the courage of a child who had been quietly navigating a difficult life. The teacher's heart ached as she observed the small details of their home, realizing that the girl's situation required more than temporary fixes. It required understanding, empathy, and action. By the end of the visit, the teacher felt a deep sense of connection, a bond formed through respect, care, and genuine concern. She knew that the story of this girl's bare feet was only beginning, and that with compassion and support, positive change was possible. That day, the teacher left the home with more than answers. She carried a promise to help, to make a difference, and to ensure that no child would have to walk barefoot alone again. As the teacher stepped into the small, modest home, she felt a mixture of curiosity, concern, and anticipation. The air was quiet, almost still, and every small detail seemed to speak volumes about the life the young girl lived outside the classroom. She noticed the worn floors, the simple furniture, and the careful way the family had arranged their small space. Everything suggested a household that worked hard to make ends meet, yet lacked many of the comforts others took for granted. The girl lingered nearby, hesitant but attentive. Her eyes watched her teacher closely, unsure what to expect. The teacher knelt down to meet her at eye level, offering a warm smile. "I wanted to understand how you are doing," she said softly. "It's okay to tell me anything." The girl shifted slightly, then glanced at her mother, who nodded gently, giving her silent permission to speak. There was a pause, a quiet moment where words seemed too heavy to carry, but the girl finally took a deep breath, ready to share her truth. Slowly, she explained that her family could not afford new shoes, that her parents worked tirelessly to provide food, pay bills, and keep the household running, but some basic things, like a proper pair of shoes, were simply too expensive. The girl's voice was soft but steady, revealing a remarkable strength that belied her young age. She described how she had carefully managed each day at school, walking barefoot without complaint, hiding her discomfort from her classmates to avoid attention or pity. The teacher listened intently, her heart aching with a mix of sadness and admiration. She realized that this quiet, brave child had been carrying a burden that most adults might find overwhelming, yet she faced it with courage, humility, and dignity. It was a lesson in resilience, a reminder of how much children can endure quietly without asking for help. The teacher felt a profound respect for the girl and an urgent desire to help in a meaningful way, not just with temporary solutions, but with support that could make a real difference. The girl's mother spoke next, her voice gentle but tinged with worry. She explained the daily challenges of managing the household, balancing work, bills, and the needs of her children. There were no complaints, only quiet explanations, a realistic portrayal of life for families who often went unnoticed. The teacher nodded, listening carefully, taking mental notes, and thinking about how she could connect the family with resources that could provide lasting assistance. As the conversation continued, the teacher observed the subtle ways the family adapted to their circumstances. The girl's mother had organized the home efficiently, making sure every item had its place, and teaching her children to make the most of what they had. It was clear that despite the challenges, love and care filled the home, but the lack of basic necessities, like shoes, was a silent struggle that affected the girl's confidence and comfort at school. The teacher gently asked if the girl had ever spoken to anyone else about her situation, and the mother shook her head, explaining that the child had always been proud and independent, unwilling to burden others with her struggles. The teacher felt a mixture of admiration and concern, understanding that pride and resilience could sometimes hide urgent needs. She reassured the girl and her mother that accepting help was not a sign of weakness but a way to create opportunities, support education, and ensure that the child could feel safe and included. After listening carefully, the teacher explained that she had come not to judge, but to help, to offer support in any way possible, and to ensure that the girl could attend school comfortably, without the worry of walking barefoot. The mother's eyes filled with gratitude, and the girl looked relieved, a small weight lifted from her young shoulders. For the first time, the teacher could see the girl's quiet smile transform into a more genuine, relaxed expression, free from the tension that had been visible all day. As the visit came to an end, the teacher reflected on what she had learned. Her heart was full of empathy, determination, and hope. She now understood that this young girl's strength, resilience, and dignity had carried her through days that most adults would find challenging, and she knew that her role was not just to teach lessons in the classroom, but to take meaningful action outside it. That day, the truth was no longer hidden, and with it came the opportunity to make a real difference in the girl's life. After hearing the girl's story and understanding the challenges her family faced, the teacher felt a deep sense of responsibility. She knew that listening was only the first step, and that real support required action, but she also understood the importance of approaching this delicately, ensuring that the girl and her family felt respected, valued, and empowered rather than pitted. The teacher carefully considered how she could make a meaningful difference in their lives. She began by offering practical solutions in a gentle, thoughtful way, explaining that she wanted to help with school necessities, including shoes and other essential items. She reassured the girl that it was okay to accept help, and that doing so did not make her weak, but rather showed courage in trusting others. The girl looked up at her teacher, her eyes filled with a mixture of relief and gratitude, as if a small but heavy weight had been lifted from her shoulders. The teacher also reached out to local community resources, making arrangements to provide consistent support for the family. She connected them with organizations that offered assistance with clothing, school supplies, and basic necessities, ensuring that the girl would no longer have to walk barefoot to school or feel ashamed of her circumstances. She explained everything to the mother, emphasizing that the goal was to empower the family, not to create dependency, and that these resources were meant to provide opportunities for a better, more comfortable life. Next, the teacher handed the girl a small pair of new shoes, carefully chosen to fit her perfectly. She helped the girl try them on, smiling warmly as the girl's eyes lit up at the simple comfort of having proper footwear for the first time in a long while. "These are for you," the teacher said softly, "so you can walk to school comfortably, and focus on learning, not on worrying about your feet." The girl's mother watched quietly, tears welling in her eyes, grateful for the thoughtfulness and care being offered. But the teacher's support went beyond material help. She took time to speak to the girl about self-confidence, dignity, and the importance of speaking up when help was needed. She explained that everyone deserves kindness and understanding, and that accepting support did not diminish her strength or courage. The girl listened carefully, her small hands gripping the shoes, absorbing every word. Slowly, the tension in her posture eased, replaced by a sense of relief, trust, and hope. To further support the girl at school, the teacher made small adjustments to the classroom environment, encouraging classmates to be more understanding, promoting teamwork, and creating an atmosphere where no student would feel embarrassed about their circumstances. She also made it clear that the girl's courage and dignity were to be admired, teaching the class valuable lessons in empathy, compassion, and human connection. The impact was subtle but profound, changing the dynamics of the classroom in a quiet, meaningful way. By the end of the day, the teacher had not only provided practical help but had also strengthened the emotional support system around the girl. She had shown that care, attention, and thoughtful action could create real change. The girl, now wearing her new shoes, walked to school the next day with a small but confident smile, no longer burdened by the invisible weight she had carried silently for so long. The teacher watched from a distance, proud of her students' courage, and grateful that she had taken the steps to offer real support. In the following weeks, the teacher continued to check in with the girl, ensuring that she felt comfortable, supported, and included. She also followed up with the family to provide ongoing assistance and guidance, reinforcing the idea that help was available when needed, and that they were not alone. The girl's confidence grew, her classroom participation increased, and she began to form stronger friendships. Her life had started to change, not just because of the shoes, but because someone had noticed her struggle and taken action with empathy and understanding. Through this experience, the teacher realized that true support goes beyond the classroom, beyond rules, lessons, and textbooks. It is about noticing quietly, acting thoughtfully, and offering help in a way that restores dignity and hope. That day, both teacher and student learned the power of compassion, and the importance of reaching out when someone is silently facing challenges. A small act of care had grown into a life-changing moment, one that would leave a lasting impression on both of them. The next morning, the classroom felt a little different, though no one could put it into words. The girl walked in wearing her new shoes, a small but bright symbol of comfort and hope. Her shoulders seemed less tense, her steps more confident, and though she remained quiet, there was a subtle glow of relief in her eyes. It was as if the small act of care from her teacher had lifted an invisible weight she had carried for far too long. The teacher watched from the front of the room, quietly observing the change. She noticed how the other students now looked at her differently, not with curiosity or judgment, but with a soft, unspoken understanding. The whispers that once fluttered behind her back had faded, replaced by small gestures of kindness, like sharing pencils, offering help with schoolwork, and including her in group activities. The classroom, once filled with tension, now carried an atmosphere of compassion and awareness. Even the girl herself began to participate more in lessons, raising her hand carefully, answering questions with quiet confidence, and showing a spark of curiosity that had been hidden before. Her classmates began to understand that everyone carries their own challenges, some visible, some hidden, and that simple acts of kindness could create a ripple effect of positivity. The teacher realized that the lessons she had planned on that day were not just about math or reading, but about humanity, empathy, and understanding. During a quiet moment between lessons, the teacher approached the girl, kneeling down to speak gently. "How are you feeling today?" she asked. Her voice was soft, filled with genuine care. The girl's eyes met hers, and for the first time, she spoke freely, explaining how grateful she was, not just for the shoes, but for the understanding and kindness that had been shown. There was a sense of trust between them now, a bond formed through observation, care, and patience, that went beyond words. The teacher also took a moment to reflect on the entire journey, thinking about how the day had started with whispers, curiosity, and concern, and had ended with empathy, understanding, and connection. She realized that teaching was not only about textbooks and tests, but about noticing, listening, and responding to the needs of each child. The experience reminded her that every student had a story, sometimes hidden, sometimes quiet, waiting for someone to see, acknowledge, and support it. Over the next few days, the teacher watched as the girl's confidence continued to grow. Her classmates began to emulate her courage in their own ways, helping each other, being considerate, and thinking about how their actions affected others. The small ripple of kindness that started with noticing bare feet had now spread throughout the classroom, teaching lessons far deeper than any curriculum could provide. At the end of the week, the teacher took a moment to speak to the class about empathy, resilience, and the importance of helping others without judgment. She shared the story of the girl's courage, emphasizing that true strength often comes quietly, and that everyone deserves support and kindness. The students listened intently, and though some were shy, others nodded in understanding, realizing that they too could make a difference in someone's life with small, thoughtful actions. The girl herself seemed to carry a new light, her posture straighter, her smile more genuine, and her interactions with others warmer. She had experienced the power of someone noticing her struggles and taking thoughtful action to help, and it gave her a sense of hope and belonging. She was no longer invisible, not because she had changed, but because people around her had chosen to care, and that made all the difference. As the day came to a close, the teacher reflected on her own journey, understanding that the true reward of teaching lay in these moments of connection, understanding, and compassion. She had seen the impact of quiet observation, thoughtful action, and genuine care, and she knew that this experience would stay with her forever, shaping the way she approached every student in the future. In the end, the story of the girl who arrived to class with no shoes became more than just a moment of curiosity. It became a lesson in courage, empathy, and human connection, a lesson that extended far beyond the classroom walls, reminding everyone that a small act of kindness could change a life, and that noticing, understanding, and helping others is one of the most powerful ways to make the world a better place.